Right. Okay. So we are going to start with our class, but before we start, okay, let me just go through the lecture schedule lah yang saya share dengan kamu sekarang. Okay. So we are now in week 4. Okay. So today we are going to go through lecture 5 and lecture 6. Okay, which will cover electron transport system. Okay, and then we're going to finish off today with oxidative phosphorylation. Okay. Now, if you're going to look at these 3 lectures or these 3 weeks that we had with each other, 6 lecture lah termasuk hari ni lah kalau kita habis ah. Okay, so basically we are going to finish the first learning unit, okay, which is on energy production. Okay, so energy production and carbohydrate metabolism. Okay, jadi untuk bahagian ini, okay, for the first learning unit, okay, we are talking mostly about what happens in the human body or what happens in the animal cell. Okay, kalau kamu makan karbohidrat, okay, macam tadi lah, I believe most of you dah makan nasi, makan mie, okay, or makan some sort of karbohidrat lah. So whatever carbohydrate that you eat is actually starch. Okay, it is starch and it is made of it's a long chain of glucose. Okay, probably 1000 glucose yang dia buat macam chain, right? So as you consume, the first thing you do is that you kunyah dia dulu lah, so you physically make it smaller. Okay, nasi tu mungkin nasi tu berbutir-butir, mie tu panjang. Okay, so you kunyah, you make it slightly smaller, and then that is also assisted by your amylase or the ptyalin in your ileo. Okay, so not only are you making it physically smaller, okay, you're also making it molecularly smaller, okay, through the action of your amylase. Okay, so that continues in the stomach, that continues with more enzyme in your usus, right? All the way daripada starch yang besar tadi, dia menjadi oligosaccharide, then in the end dia akan jadi only one, dia akan berpecah lah menjadi one monosaccharide, which is glucose, right? So it's the glucose yang kamu makan, okay, glucose yang kamu makan gets absorbed into your blood, okay, into your blood plasma, okay, then it gets absorbed into any one of your cell, okay, sel mata, sel hati, sel jantung, okay, muscle cell, okay, in the form of glucose. Okay, so once it gets absorbed dalam bentuk glucose, then that is where glycolysis starts. Okay, so glycolysis basically is the conversion or is the breakdown of the 6 carbon glucose menjadi pyruvate. Okay, so we covered that in the first in the second lecture lah. Okay, so we talk about glycolysis, and by the end of glycolysis, the end product is pyruvate. Okay, which is a 3 carbon, not sugar lah, it's a 3 carbon biomolecule. Okay, dia tak jadi sugar so lepas tu. Okay, sugar stops in stage 5. Okay, daripada 6 tadi kan, lepas tu dia menghasilkan GAP and DHAP. That's the final sugar. Okay, that's the smallest sugar that you can get. And after that, it goes continue on until the 10 stages or into the 10th stage of glycolysis, di mana kamu menghasilkan pyruvate. Okay, so by then it's already pyruvate. Okay, it's a lactic acid. It's a organic acid. Okay, so itu yang kita cover in the second lecture. Okay, so what is the main product? Main product is pyruvate. Okay, you produce 2 ATP, okay, and you also produce 2 NADH. Okay, kenapa saya cakap the 2 NADH? Because the NADH will be brought to be processed further. Itu yang kita akan tengok nanti in lecture 5 and 6. Okay, now so if you are dalam keadaan yang relax, okay, you're relaxed, then then all the pyruvate will go to the Krebs cycle. Okay, but before it goes into the Krebs cycle, okay, pyruvate is produced from glucose in the cytoplasm. Okay, so pyruvate is brought into the mitochondria. Okay, inside the mitochondrial matrix, that is where Krebs cycle or TCA berlaku. Okay, so itu kita dah cover dulu lah. Right, so what happens basically, a pyruvate comes in and then dia akan ditindak balas, then you will lose 1 carbon because it's a 3 carbon. Okay, so you lose 1 carbon dalam bentuk CO2. Itu yang kamu hidu keluar lah, itu yang kamu nafas keluar. Then you have the 2 acetyl-CoA. So the 2 acetyl-CoA will gabung dengan 4 oxaloacetate, then it becomes 6, which is citrate. So it begins the citrate cycle lah, the Krebs cycle. Okay, so that was what you covered last week. Okay, so by the end of the Krebs cycle, okay, the 3 main product yang badan kamu guna adalah ATP. Okay, so kalau plant dia akan hasilkan ATP. Kalau manusia, okay, with human being, human cell, we produce GTP. Okay, so ATP or GTP is not important. Okay, the A or the G tak penting. Okay, memang penting lah, but what is more important is the T. Okay, so you get the triphosphate. Okay, so adenosine triphosphate. So someone asked me about ATP. So ATP, when you're going to look at the phosphate is like a battery. Okay, so sometimes you take one phosphate, kamu ambil satu bateri. Sometimes you take two phosphate, you ambil dua bateri. Okay, sometimes you even ambil all the three phosphate, so tiga bateri lah. So the phosphate is like a battery that is used in all the other tindak balas, all the reaction, okay, all the chemical reaction uses the phosphate, because without the phosphate, it's like there's no battery. Okay, so you put the battery so that the tindak balas can happen. So once the tindak balas or once the reaction has been completed, what happens is that the phosphate is taken away. So dia akan take away, kalau satu dia akan letak dekat ADP. So AD maksudnya die, dua. So dia letak phosphate, dia jadi tiga balik lah, try. So basically it's recharging it. Okay. Sometimes the reaction use two phosphate, jadi pyrophosphate. So these two akan bergabung dengan AMP, okay, adenosine monophosphate. Okay, so dia akan menjadi balik triphosphate balik. Okay, so recharge. Then when other reaction needs the phosphate, then they akan ambil lah. They will either take one phosphate, or they take two phosphate, or they will take the three phosphate, okay, to become the battery. Okay, and not only do you use the phosphate, the adenosine ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Sometimes you take the phosphate, sometimes you take the A, the adenosine. Right? Okay, so by the end of the citric acid cycle, you produce 2 ATP or GTP. Okay, you produce FADH2. Okay, but the most important biomolecule that you're producing is NADH. Okay, so glycolysis 2 NADH. Okay, TCA cycle is 15. 6 NADH. Okay, so let me just show you this slide again. So by the end of the glycolysis, okay, you produce 4 NADH. Okay, and by the end of citric acid cycle, you produce 6 more NADH. Okay, so why NADH? I think saya nak terangkan. So it's the NADH that is brought forward into lecture 5 and lecture 6. Okay, which is the electron transport system. Okay, so all the ATP that is produced akan bawa keluar. Okay, so all the ATPs can be used by the cell freely or by other reaction freely. Okay, now we want the NADH. Okay, so the NADH from the glycolysis, NADH from the TCA cycle will be brought to the if you look at your mitochondria, the internal surface ataupun the internal membrane, it will be brought into the internal membrane. Okay, not outside, but it's the internal. Okay, jadi itu yang kita akan masuk. Right, jadi itu kita akan masuk nanti. Now, before we masuk into that, okay, before we go into lecture 5 and 6, okay, I just want to remind you that our first quiz will be this Friday. Okay, so we will open the quiz from 8 to 11 in the evening. Okay, so you are free to do it satu kali, once. Okay, we will set that you can only do it once dalam masa mungkin 20 hingga 25 minit ataupun 30 minit. Okay, highly likely it's going to be about 20 minutes lah. Okay, probably about 10 or 15 questions. So meaning one question you answer a minute, right? So please take note of that. Okay, I will remind everyone, okay, pada pagi itu, okay, about the quiz, right? And also bagi yang menyambut Ipoh Bali, okay, sebelum saya lupa, takut saya lupa, okay, selamat Ipoh Bali lah, okay, right? Okay, I think it's gonna be this Thursday, right? Okay, so anyway, right? So another thing that I have to tell you is that this will be my last lecture with you all. Okay, kalau kamu tengok kita punya timetable, if you look at that timetable, yang this blue portion is my part of the class. Alright, so I'm going to finish with lecture 6. Okay, then Dr. Simon akan ambil the next 3 lecture starting from next week. Okay, so same schedule, Monday 2 to 5. Okay, on this is going to be by Dr. Simon for the next 3 weeks. Okay, then followed by our mid-sem exam. Okay, in week 8. Okay, then followed by 3 weeks of the Tawang. Okay, dan seterusnya lah. Okay, alright. So I'm going to finish off my part, which is lecture 5 and lecture 6. Okay, jadi kita akan masuk dalam lecture 5. Okay, now, so if you look at the progression of your good sugar tadi, okay, ingat so you first started with your glycolysis. Okay, so saya ulang sikit lagi lah. Okay, glycolysis. Okay, then by the by the midsection of glycolysis, that's your 3 carbon sugar. So mula-mula dia 6 carbon jadi 3 carbon, which is GAP and DHAP. Okay, dan lepas tu dia turun, dan the final product will be 2 pyruvate ataupun pyruvate, and you're going to produce 2 pyruvate lah, 3-3, right? So this is the end of glycolysis. So you get 2 pyruvate, you get 2 ATP, you get 4 NADH. Okay, right? So the pyruvate then will undergo the Krebs cycle, but before that dia akan hilang satu lagi carbon dalam bentuk CO2. Okay, so daripada 3 dia jadi 2, okay, which is acetyl-CoA. Okay, so acetyl-CoA enters the Krebs cycle. Okay, we covered this. So your main product will be the NADH, okay, FADH2, and then GTP, right? So apa lagi berlaku lepas tu? Okay, so glycolysis, Krebs cycle. Okay, after Krebs cycle, then the next thing is to process all the NADH yang kamu hasilkan, right? So all the NADH from glycolysis, okay, all the NADH that you produce from the Krebs cycle will be brought into the inner membrane of the mitochondria. Okay, this is cytoplasm. Okay, this is the matrix of the mitochondria. Then it goes into the inner membrane. Okay, jadi kalau kamu nampak, then it goes into the electron transport system, or and then followed by the oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, let me blow it up for you. Okay, so this is the matrix of the mitochondria. This is the inner part. Okay, kalau the mitochondria, you have the inner part yang di dalam, the matrix. Okay, this is where all the Krebs cycle happens. So Krebs cycle happens dekat sini, menghasilkan again apa tadi, NADH, dan menghasilkan FADH2. Okay, so all your NADH will and on all the FADH will undergo the first step, okay, which is the electron transport system. Okay, so after the transport system, the electron transport system, then the final fate of the H, okay, basically lepas menghasilkan FADH, you are basically producing a lot of H. Okay, so H is the final one. So itu you see a lot of H here. Okay, a lot of the H are being brought into the intermembrane. Okay, between the outer membrane and the intermembrane dekat H sini. Electron transport system berlaku dekat the membrane. Okay, basically to bring the H into the the space between the two membrane in mitochondria, right? So that is the electron transport system. Okay, dan lepas tu kita akan akhirkan dengan inilah. Okay, what happens to that H? Okay, so basically you are just transporting the H. Okay, masuk dekat sini. Okay, then the H will come back in. Okay, then that is when ATP is produced. So finally everything will end up by forming H2O, water. Ni ya. Okay, ni. Water is the final product. ATP is also the final product. And after that, habis. Okay, selesai with basically the glucose metabolism in your cell, right? Okay, jadi kita akan masuk dalam dua bahagian ini. Okay, we're going to go into the electron transport system. Okay, and then kita akan berehat sekejap nanti, then we're going to go into the oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, hari ini kurang sedikit reaction. Okay, we have less reaction to look at. Okay, but you be looking at a lot of structures. Okay, especially in the last part nanti. Dia as equally pening, okay, dengan reaction. Alright, so we're going to go into the electron transport system. Okay, so the electron transport system and the oxidative phosphorylation, this is a couple. Okay, this is one reaction. Okay, this is another reaction, but together they become a couple. So itu apa tu dia dikatakan coupling. It's a coupling reaction. Okay, satu mengeluarkan H, satu memasukkan H. Okay, so for the now, so basically, for the electron transport system, you are exiting the H. Okay, semua H ini akan dikeluarkan ke intermembrane. Okay, and for the oxidative phosphorylation, the H yang ada dekat in between the membrane is brought back, okay, by the ATPase. Okay, this is the ATPase ataupun the complex nomor 5, the fifth complex. Okay, so it's a couple. Satu keluarkan, satu bawa masuk. Okay, to balance things out. Okay, and this coupling is called the chemiosmotic theory. Okay, so the chemiosmotic theory, okay, suggests that ATP synthesis, okay, which is ini ya, ATP synthesis, okay, which is the final reaction or the final mechanism. Okay, ATP synthesis in the cell, okay, comes from the electrochemical gradient across the inner membrane. Okay, so this is the inner membrane. Okay, this is the outer membrane of the mitochondria. This is the inner membrane. Okay, this is the outer membrane. This inner membrane. Okay, what happened is that the gradient will across the inner membrane of the mitochondria. Okay, and it will come back here. Basically, that's what it means lah. It's a couple. Okay, so by using the energy of the NADH, yang NADH yang kamu guna tadi lah, bukan guna yang dihasilkan during glycolysis and during Krebs cycle. Okay, so basically the NADH and FADH2, okay, that is formed during the Krebs cycle is used to transport the hydrogen across. Okay, untuk for the first part, dia akan transport from the matrix of the mitochondria into the intermembrane. Okay, not outside tapi dia di tengah. Right? So this process involves the electron transport system (ETS) yang kita akan cerita sekarang, and it also involves the oxidative phosphorylation yang kita akan bincang in the second lecture later. Okay, so semua benda ni kamu dah dengar. I believe you have went through this. It's a matter of you tahu ataupun ingat saja. Okay, and most of you I think mungkin dah lupa dah pun. Right? So this is a refresher course lah, a refresher lecture lah for you. Right? So during the electron transport system or during the electron transport chain, some call it ETC, some call it ETS. Okay? So during the electron transport chain, okay, what happens is that electron, okay, is carried by the coenzyme. Okay, these are passed through a chain of protein and coenzyme to generate a proton gradient across the inner membrane of the mitochondria. Okay, so basically what it means is that at this point, okay, while H is being transported out, okay, electron is being transported in between. Okay, it involves 4 different complex. Okay, complex 1, complex 2, complex 3, and complex 4. Okay, yang terakhir nanti is complex 5. Okay, so what this line is saying is that ETS, okay, involves coenzyme and also involves protein. Okay, let me go back to this one. Okay, this is protein. This is actually protein. Okay, this is protein, and actually there is another coenzyme here. Okay, dia tidak tunjuk lah. Okay, so these are basically protein and coenzyme that is responsible for the movement of electron. Okay, the electron starts here, it move here, it move into complex 3. Okay, electron is also produced here and is moved into complex 3 and then is brought into complex 4. Okay, itu kita akan tengok satu persatu nanti ya. Right? Okay, and then finally the osmotic theory also involve oxidative phosphorylation, which is the last part, okay, yang melibatkan pembentukan ATP tadi. Okay, so the proton gradient runs downhill to drive the synthesis of ATP. Basically maksud dia all the H yang dihasilkan tadi dia akan bawa masuk, okay, dia akan masuk balik, okay, and once that happen, ATP is synthesized. Okay, right? So electron transport, okay, the first process is coupled, okay, with the oxidative phosphorylation. Meaning these two they become a couple. Satu mengeluarkan H, satu bawa masuk H. Right? So basically dia berpasangan lah. 13 ini berpasangan. Okay? And both of these processes happen in or at the inner mitochondrial membrane. Okay? So it's at the cristae or the crista. Okay? The infolding of the mitochondria. Okay, so first let us look at the mitochondria. Okay, so the mitochondria, yang gambar aja yang kita tengok ni. Okay, when you look at the mitochondria, okay, it looks macam bean, macam it's a rod shape. Okay, dia panjang sikit. Okay, so dia ada lapisan dalam, luar. Okay, and then you have the inner infolding. Okay, so you have the outside membrane, okay, the outer membrane. Okay, and then you have the inner membrane. Okay, and the inner membrane dia berlipat-lipat. Okay, it folds. Okay, and this membrane is called cristae or crista. Okay, jadi when you move inside again, then you have the matrix lah. Okay, which is the inside. Okay, the inside of the mitochondria. So the matrix or the inside of the mitochondria, that is where your Krebs cycle happens to produce the NADH. Okay, so the NADH will go to the inner membrane. Okay, we'll go through all the protein. Kan, you have the complex 1, 2, 3, 4 tadi. Okay, supaya the NADH will drive the pumping of hydrogen from the mitochondria into the the intermembrane space ni. Okay, this is the space lah, intermembrane ni. Right? Okay. Okay, so the outer membrane, okay, the outer membrane is freely permeable to small molecule. Maksudnya small molecule they can come in easily, quite easily. Okay, and it also contains a lot of porins. Okay, porin are proteins that they work as door. Okay, jadi kalau kamu cakap porin, some are aquaporin, maksud dia bawa air masuk. Okay, some are protein porins, so they bring protein. Okay, so porin is basically a general term for protein that acts as a doorway. Okay, right? And these porins are about 10,000 Dalton in size, meaning they are very big. Okay, they are very big. Okay, because in relation to most protein lah. Right? Now, in the inner membrane, okay, inner membrane ni, the infolding or the cristae or the crista, okay, this region is very rich in protein. Okay, kalau dekat dekat outer membrane pun banyak protein juga. Okay, usually works as doorway ataupun sebagai pintu. But in the inner membrane, okay, you have other protein that works for the process of electron transport. Okay, right? The inner membrane, okay, is impermeable to proton and larger polar and ionic substance. Okay, maksud kalau yang dalam ni dia tidak begitu it is not easily keluar masuk. Okay, benda tak senang keluar masuk when it comes to the inner membrane, right? However, like this thing it says, it is rich in protein. Okay, so it contains ATP synthase, okay, which is complex number 5 tadi. Okay, kita akan tengok nanti. And it is also rich in transporters. Okay, so the transporters basically are the complex 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, those are basically transporting protein. Okay, they transport the hydrogen from the inside to the outside. Okay, so crystal ataupun the highly the enfolding membrane, okay, dia it is folding, okay, basically to increase the surface area. Okay, so that ATP production or hydrogen or proton pumping becomes more efficient. Okay, sebab itu dia berlipat lah, right? The matrix, okay, inside here the matrix, okay, or the cytosol of the mitochondria is also protein rich. Okay, and it contains a lot of enzyme that is involved with the TCA cycle. Yalah, because TCA cycle happens in the matrix. Okay, and the intermembrane space, okay, dia punya composition is same with cytosol. Okay, only that it has a lot more hydrogen. Okay, because hydrogen is being pumped into the intermembrane, right? Okay, so I think that one something you know already lah from your cell biology, right? Okay, so when you look at the inner membrane, okay, this inner membrane, okay, it has a lot of protein. Okay, it is protein rich. So basically, kalau kita nak lukis lagi, okay, we can draw it like this. So this is the inner membrane. Okay, this is the inner membrane. Okay, this is the matrix. Yang biru ni matrix. Okay, yang warna jingga ini, the darker orange is the intermembrane. Okay, then outside here is another cell wall. Is another membrane, and this is your cytoplasm lah. Okay, so basically on the inner membrane you have a lot of protein. Okay, so in this case dia letak sini complex number 1, complex number 2, okay, complex number 3, complex number 4, okay, and then you have the complex number 5. Okay, jadi just to make things more clearer, I'll go back to this gambar aja. So you have ni lah, you have complex number 1, complex number 2, sama, complex number 3, number 4 and number 5. Okay, so that is the same that is drawn here lah. Okay, so don't get confused. Okay, yang tadi dia cuma lukis dalam bentuk rata, this one dia saja lukis dalam bentuk lengkung lah. Okay, right? So in between complex number 1 and number 3, okay, in between complex number 2 and complex number 3, okay, you have a coenzyme. Okay, this is what we call as coenzyme Q. Okay, right? So coenzyme Q is actually a transport protein. Okay, this transport between the membrane. Okay, nampak dia dalam kawasan membrane ni saja. Okay, and then from complex number 3 to complex number 4, there is another transport protein. Okay, this is called the cytochrome C. Okay, so this cytochrome C, it can be in the membrane, it can be between the membrane, or it can be outside dan dia masuk balik sini. Okay, so this is a transport protein. This is also a transport protein. Okay, so they transport what? They transport electron from complex 1. Okay, from this one, transport from complex 1 pergi sini, bawa pergi complex 3. Then from complex 2, dia bawa pergi coenzyme, dan dia juga bawa pergi complex 3. Okay, so this basically shuttle. Okay, this is the shuttle that brings electron. Okay, now cytochrome C is another transport protein that shuttle the electron from complex 3 to complex number 4. Okay, jadi itulah fungsi dia secara bird's eye view. Okay, right? Okay, so for the electron transport system, okay, there are 4 protein complex in the inner mitochondrial membrane. Okay, so at the inner membrane, so you have the complex number 1, which is this one. Okay, complex number 2, which is this one. Okay, complex number 3, which is this one. Then you have complex number 4, which is the last one for electron transport system. Okay, 4. Okay, ada kompleks 5 lah, but kompleks 5 ni adalah untuk yang seterusnya, which is the oxidative phosphorylation. Alright? Okay, right? Okay, so you have complex number 1, you have complex number 2, okay, complex number 3, and complex number 4. Okay, so I hope that make things more clearer lah. Okay, as we're going to go into the ETS ataupun the electron transport system, right? So this is the membrane. Okay, this is the intermembrane. Okay, now again in the matrix, what happened? The matrix is where Krebs cycle berlaku. Jadi sebab itu dia letak sini Krebs cycle. Okay, or the citric acid. And again, seperti yang saya mulakan tadi dalam kelas, what is the main product is the NADH and the FADH2, right? Okay, so all the NADH that is produced, all the NADH that is produced during the Krebs cycle will go into complex number 1. Okay, nampak, right? Jadi dia letak sini, this is NADH. Okay, all the NADH akan pergi complex number 1. Okay, now what else is the product is now FADH2, betul kan? So where does FADH2 pergi pula? Now FADH2 akan pergi kepada complex number 2. Okay, so probably many of you still are confused when it comes to ETS. Okay, tapi itulah cerita dia. Okay, so in the Krebs cycle you produce NADH. That NADH will go to complex number 1. Okay, as it goes to complex number 1, okay, it will drive the movement of proton from the inside of the matrix to the intermembrane space. Jadi I will explain later, okay? But ni dia punya itulah pengenalan dia, right? So NADH goes to complex number 1, okay? And all the FADH2 that is produced will go to complex number 2, okay? Jadi what they do is that when NADH comes here, okay, dia akan berpecah menjadi proton and electron. Okay, the proton go outside. Kita pun pergi dekat membrane space, in the intermembrane space. The electron pergi mana? Electron, nampak ni, the electron. Let me take away this thing. So the electron akan pergi dekat coenzyme Q. Okay, sama juga for complex number 2, okay, dia punya electron akan pergi sini. Tapi complex 2, it doesn't pump out hydrogen. So itu kalau kamu nampak, ini ada hydrogen, ini tak ada hydrogen. Okay, ini tak ada hydrogen. But what it does is that it uses the energy from FADH2 to split, to produce electron yang akan dibawa oleh coenzyme Q lah. So coenzyme Q will bring it to complex number 3. Okay. Okay. Alright. So a lipid soluble coenzyme, which is this one. This is a lipid soluble coenzyme ataupun UQ. Okay, sometimes you call it UQ, okay, ubiquinone. Sometimes you call it coenzyme Q. Ni. Okay, and a water soluble protein, the cytochrome C. Ni cytochrome C ni yang hijau ni. Okay, will shuttle the electron, okay, between the complex. Okay, so between complex 1 and 2 is the coenzyme Q. Okay, kepada complex 3. Now between complex 3 to complex 4 is the cytochrome C. Okay, fat soluble, water soluble. Okay, jadi these are some of the mechanism yang kamu kena hafal lah. Right? So the electron generally falls in energy through the chain, okay, from complex 1, sini where you produce the electron, and also in FHDH2, okay, dekat sini. So produce electron, bawa pergi sini, produce electron, bawa pergi sini. Right? And all of this electron, it needs to reach complex number 4. Okay? So, but before that, it will go to complex number 3 dulu lah, right? Okay, so that is the early part of the electron transport system. Okay, right? So basically, gambar aja ni just to show, okay, the types of protein. Okay, okay. So complex number 1, okay, will give the electron to the ubiquinon tadi. Okay, complex number 2 pun akan bagi dekat ubiquinon. Okay, so the ubiquinon okay, complex 1, complex 1, complex 2, okay, ubiquinon. Okay, complex 1, complex 2, the ubiquinon. Alright? So, daripada ubiquinon, it will go to complex 3. So, from the ubiquinon, it will go into complex 3. Okay? So, from the complex 3, it will go through cytochrome C. Okay? So, cytochrome C ni dekat sini. Right? Then finally, it will go into complex number 4 lah. So complex number 4 is basically the end of electron transport system. Okay, and the main product is just water. Okay, but what happens is that by complex number 4, a lot of proton is pumped into the intermembrane. All right. Okay, so let us look at the 4 different complexes. Okay, we'll start with complex number 1. Okay, in the electron transport system. Now, in complex number 1, in the electron transport system, okay, the enzyme that is involved is NADH CoQ reductase. Okay, it is a very big enzyme, and in fact, it is made of 30 protein subunit. Besar, sangat besar. Okay, kalau nak dilukis, okay, this is just this is how it looks when you draw it big. Okay, but when you look at the enzyme, okay, this enzyme, the NADH CoQ reductase, actually it is made of small 30 units. Okay, 30 dia campur. Okay, so basically macam ni lah, dia bergabung, then it looks like this secara kasar, right? Okay, so it is a big protein, and the punya size is about 850 kilodalton, which is very big. Okay, so what happened is that during the first part of complex number 1, okay, apa yang berlaku ialah all the NADH you produce, okay, in the Krebs cycle, okay, will enter. Okay, so you have all the NADH, okay, will enter the first complex. Okay, so electron transfer will happen from the NADH, okay, to the ni. Okay, basically it goes into this one. This is the CoQ. Okay, so basically in this process, okay, apa yang sebenarnya berlaku ialah you want to transfer all the electron, okay, all the way pergi dekat sini. Okay, this is the carrier tadi. Okay, this is the carrier. Then this will go into complex number 3. Okay, all right. So the first step in this process is that, okay, so the first step is that 2 electron will be transferred from NADH. Okay, 2 electron, okay, daripada sini akan bawa pergi sini. Okay, so 2 elektron ni. Okay, so 2 elektron, okay, we know that dia akan split into electron and proton. So proton dia akan bawa pergi sini, the electron dia akan bawa pergi naik atas. Okay, so 2 electron is transferred here. Okay, and then the 2 electron, okay, will be transferred to the FMN, okay, untuk menghasilkan FNNH2, 2 ni. Okay, so this is the electron yang kamu transfer 2 tadi ya. Okay, so what is FNN? It's flavin mononucleotide. Okay, now again flavin or flavo. Okay, this is again vitamin 2. Okay, nak senang ingat vitamin 2, vitamin 3. Right? Okay, so the hydrogen is brought into the flavo mononucleotide. Okay, 2, then converts the 2 electron to 1 electron transfer, and then what happens during the transport of 2 electron, okay, all the way into the ferrum sulfur complex, okay, 2 electron, okay, akan dibawa kepada the ubiquinon. Okay, so first you have just the quinon, now it's reduced. Okay, kenapa dia reduce? Sebab dia terima 2 hydrogen daripada sini. Okay, dia terima 2 proton from this electron, right? And as this happen, okay, what happen is that, okay, 4 electron is pumped from the inside of the mitochondria into the intermembrane. Okay, so at this point 4 electron akan dipump keluar. Okay, so remember that. Okay, the first event is the transfer of 2 proton to the ubiquinon. Okay, the second important event is the pumping of 4 hydrogen ataupun proton into the intermembrane of the mitochondria. Okay, right? So this happens in complex number 1. Okay, so this involves the NADH yang dihasilkan tadi in the Krebs cycle. Now, again in the Krebs cycle you have FADH2. Okay, so what happens to the FADH2? Now, FADH2 will go to the second complex. Okay, so the NADH will not go to the second complex, but the FADH2 will go into the second complex. Right? So the enzyme that is involved in this reaction is succinate CoA reductase. Okay, kalau tadi yang the first one is NADH. Okay, this one is succinate coenzyme Q reductase. Okay, also known as succinate dehydrogenase. Right? So cerita dia sama. Okay, cerita dia sama. Remember between succinate and fumarate, if you remember your Krebs cycle, you produce the FADH2 tadi. So basically, this the production of FADH2 from FAD, okay, between succinate and fumarate actually happens in complex number 2. Okay, so basically it's the same thing. Okay, when this happens, it's removing the two proton. Okay, daripada FADH2 ni dua ni this H. Okay, bawa pergi sini. Okay, right, same process. Okay, so but the thing that is different between complex number 1 and complex number 2 is that there is no hydrogen being pumped. Okay, cuma perpindahan proton. Okay, dua proton daripada sini goes into the ubiquinone. There's no hydrogen being pumped in or out. Okay, now let's go back to the first complexes now. Now in the first complex, okay, you see that there is a hydrogen being pumped out. Okay, as this happens, hydrogen is being pumped out. Okay, but for complex number 2, okay, basically the same mechanism, which is to transfer the proton, okay, without the movement of proton inside or outside. Yeah, jadi that is what happens in complex number 2. Okay, so you have, this is the coenzymes now. Okay, so all this proton akan pergi mana? All this proton will go to complex number 3. Okay. Okay, let me go back to the complex number 1. Okay, so you have 2 proton here. Okay, will go to complex number 3. Okay. Now in complex number 2, okay, you also have the 2 proton here. Okay, pergi mana? Juga dia akan pergi kompleks number 3. So basically complex 3 dia akan terima semua proton yang dihasilkan dekat complex 1 dan complex 2. Right? So now we're going to complex 3. Right? So in complex 3, the enzyme that is involved is CoQ ataupun coenzyme Q cytochrome C reductase. Okay, so what happens is that okay, right? So cytochrome B. Okay, right. Okay, so ni, so it starts here. Remember tadi the ubiquinone H2. Okay, the ubiquinone H2 ni, sorry, this. Okay, the ubiquinone H2, okay, will donate the 2 hydrogen tadi, the 2 proton or the 2 hydrogen. Okay, dia akan donate, bukan dia donate, dia akan transfer into the cytochrome C. Okay, so this one dari mana tadi? This one from complex number 1. Okay, this one is also from mana? From complex number 2. Okay, so dia punya tindak balas tu banyak, but basically what you should know is that all this hydrogen will undergo all this transfer. Okay, the transfer into the ferrum sulfur complex. Okay, then it will go into the subunit C1. Okay, finally it will go into the cytochrome C. Okay, so all of all of the electron akan pergi dekat sini. Okay, right? So basically that is what happens. Okay, so dia akan bawa pergi cytochrome C. Then cytochrome C is rich with electron. Okay, now during this process, okay, what happened is that more hydrogen will be pumped. Okay, look at this. Okay, so 4 hydrogen will be pumped again into the intermembrane. Okay, okay, 4 proton, okay, will be pumped out of the mitochondria. Okay, from the inside of the mitochondria, okay, into the intermembrane. Bukan outside actually is the intermembrane. Okay, there is another membrane dekat luar sini. Right? Jadi 4. Okay, jadi kamu dah transfer berapa proton tadi? Dah transfer 4 from complex number 1. Okay, lepas tu sekarang complex number 2 tak ada. Okay, complex number 3 another 4. Okay, so you have 4 plus 4, that's 8. Okay, another 2 will be in complex number 4 nanti. Right? So, um, all the electron that is brought into the cytochrome C in complex number 3, dia akan bawa pergi pergi complex number 4. Right? So basically ini lah. So this is the electron and the proton. Okay, so the electron akan bawa pergi cytochrome C. Okay, then the cytochrome C akan bawa pergi complex number 4. Right? Okay. Just bypass this one. Okay. So we'll go to complex number 4. Right? So in complex number 4, what happened is that complex number 4 will receive the electron. Okay, the electron that basically comes from complex number 1, number 2, okay, bawa pergi complex number 3, from complex number 3, dia bawa lagi pergi cytochrome, then the cytochrome C akan bawa pergi complex number 4, right? So that is what happens, okay, the movement of the electron. Okay, and this movement, okay, involves cytochrome C oxidase. The electron from cytochrome C tadi yang cytochrome C kan, ni cytochrome C tadi yang daripada complex number 3, okay, cytochrome C tu, okay, dia akan bawa pergi complex number 4, right? Okay, electron from the cytochrome C, okay, are used in a 4 electron reduction of O2 to produce water. Okay, jadi right, so ni adalah cytochrome C tadi So this cytochrome C basically comes from complex number 3. So dia akan bawa all the electron pergi complex number 4. Okay, so dia akan bawa pergi sini. Okay, so you get complex number 4 sini. Okay, jadi the electron from the cytochrome C, this one, okay, use in a 4 electron reduction of water, okay, oxygen, okay, to produce water. Okay, so basically, by the end of this process, okay, in complex number 4, okay, all the electron that is brought, okay, daripada complex 1, complex 2, bawa pergi complex 3, complex 3, bawa pergi complex 4. Okay, all these electron are used to produce water from oxygen and hydrogen. Okay, and in this process, 2 hydrogen akan dikeluarkan. Okay, so tadi complex number 1, 4 hydrogen. Complex number 2 tak ada. Complex number 3, 4. Then this one, 2. So 4 tambah 4 tambah 2, 10. So basically, by the end of electron transport system, what happens is that 10 hydrogen will be brought into the intermembrane space. So it becomes very acidic. Okay, sebab banyak sangat hydrogen ion, right? Okay. Right. So this is just inilah. Just a short form of this one. Okay, but basically just know itulah. Okay, between complex number 3 to complex number 4, okay, cytochrome C akan bawa elektron, and this elektron akan digunakan untuk menghasilkan air. Okay, so basically by the end of this one, air akan dihasilkan, right? Okay, so if you look at this gambar aja, okay, this is a summary of the electron transport system. Okay, remember ada 4 for complex. Okay, so you have complex number 1. You have complex number 2, you have complex number 3, and then you have complex number 4. Okay. Someone asked me the number of proton and electron, are they equal? They are not so equal. Okay. Sebab what basically happens is that proton digerakkan. Okay. Hydrogen dipump keluar, and some are produced internally. So the pengiraan overall when it yang itu I'm not going to go in, but just know that the important event that happens is the pumping of 10 electron. Okay, just remember that. Okay, the important event that happens during electron transport system is the pumping of 10 electron, the production of 1 water, okay, and the moving of the electron lah. Okay, jadi kita akan tengok tu lagi ya. Okay, so in complex number 1, okay, what happen is that it will receive the NADH, kan? Okay, and then complex number 2, it will receive all the FADH2. Okay, Krebs cycle, right? Okay, so what happens to the NADH? The NADH basically is to provide H. Okay, jadi sebab itu NADH ini by the time tindak balas ni habis, dia tak ada lagi H. So it provides the H, okay, so that the H will be brought here. Okay, what about coenzyme Q? Okay, now coenzyme Q, this is coenzyme Q. This is coenzyme Q. Right? This is the cytochrome. Okay, let me go back. Kalau kita tengok balik gambar rajah tadi. This one, banyak sangat gambar rajah ini, boleh membandingkan jugalah. Okay, now complex number 1. Okay, complex number 2. Complex number 3. Now, where your friend asked me, where's coenzyme Q? Inilah coenzyme Q. Coenzyme Q is between 1 and 3, is between 2 and 3. Nampak ni? This is 1. Okay. Let me go back here again. Okay. So this is coenzyme Q. Ni UQ. Coenzyme Q. So it's between 1 and 3. Okay, you see that? It's between 2 and 3. Okay. So basically, kenapa? Why do you have? Okay, this is to shuffle the proton. Okay, or electron. Okay, between complex 3 to 1 and 3 and 2 and 3. Okay. So this carry the electron or the proton here. Okay, this the cytochrome C will carry it to complex number 4 from number 3. Okay, so this gambar rajah, this figure can be quite confusing because you ask, kenapa ni number 1? Why number 2 here? Why is number 3? Okay, it's because they want to show that 1 goes to 3, 2 goes to 3. Okay, dia punya perantaran is the coenzyme Q. Okay, and it's the same if you're going to look at this gambar rajah tadi. Okay, 1 goes to 3. Okay, 2 also goes to 3. But what is the intermediate? The intermediate is coenzyme Q. Okay, so between 3 and 4, what is the intermediate? The intermediate is the cytochrome C. Okay, let me go back again to forward to that gambar rajah just now. Okay, so kalau kamu tidak mau confuse, you can even have 1 here, you can even have 2 here. But problem is that gambar rajah ni, it try to simplify. Okay, that between 1 and 3 and 2 and 3 is the UQ. Okay, right? Jadi I hope you see that. I hope they see that. So the coenzyme Q, tugas dia is basically to carry the proton or the electron from 1 and from 2 to number 3. Itu saja tugas dia. Okay, they are what is called transport protein. Okay, ini menghasilkan proton dan elektron. Ini pun menghasilkan proton dan elektron. Okay, and this proton from number 1 and proton from number 2 has to be brought into number 3. So who's responsible? Is the coenzyme Q. Okay, right? And the proton or the electron must be brought into complex number 4. Who is the responsible? Inilah dia punya Uber. Okay, dia punya Uber rider. Okay, it's the cytochrome C. So this is between 2 and 1 to 3. 3 and 4 is the cytochrome C. So basically, they all work together. Okay, they all work together to transport the electron. Okay, jadi the electron dekat sini lah. Okay, electron ni, they all transport the electron here to 3, then from 3 they transport to number 4. Okay, why? Because this electron, what is needed to produce the water? So basically, itulah dia punya cerita. Okay, water is the final product by the end of ETC, and that being done, okay, at complex number 1, 4 hydrogen akan dipump keluar. Okay, complex number 3, another 4 pump keluar. Okay, at complex number 4, only 2 pump keluar. Jadi 4 plus 4 plus 2 is 10. Right? So if you have a lot of the hydrogen being pumped into the intermembrane, okay, so the intermembrane becomes very highly very acidic lah. Becomes very acidic. Okay, so this is pumping into the intermembrane, right? So dah banyak sangat. So what happens? Then it goes into the oxidative phosphorylation. Okay, where the excess hydrogen will be brought balik juga into the matrix. Okay, by the 5th complex. Itu kita akan tengok in the second lecture nanti. Right? So basically this is what happens. Okay, so I hope it gives you a clear picture lah, okay, apa yang sebenarnya berlaku. Okay, sebenarnya yang berlaku again is the utilization of the NADH and the FADH from the Krebs cycle. Okay, to transport the electron. Okay, all the way into complex number 4. Okay, to do what? To produce water. Okay, and not only to produce water, but also to pump hydrogen, okay, into the intermembrane, so that it will be pumped again later to produce ATP. Okay, jadi itulah yang sebenarnya berlaku lah. So that's the summary of benda ni mengacau saya. Okay. Right now, for ETS and oxidative phosphorylation, okay, they are also inhibitors, okay, and these inhibitors are usually poison, okay, because basically you want ETS and oxidative phosphorylation to happen. Why? Because you want to produce phosphate, ataupun you want to produce ATP. Okay, if you don't produce ATP, then you will have no battery for all the other reaction to happen. Ingat kamu tengok orang, kamu dengar all the deria, all the reaction in your cell. Okay, needs a lot of phosphate. Okay, so if you don't have phosphate, then none of this will happen. So if none of this happen, then you will die lah. Okay, so this can happen. And kalau kamu nak bunuh orang, kamu pastikan you bagi the inhibitor of ETS and oxidative phosphorylation, they will die. Okay, senang lah. Contohnya cyanide. Cyanide is actually an inhibitor of ETS. Okay, alright, we're gonna go there. Okay, we're gonna talk about the inhibition of ETS and oxidative phosphorylation. Now, there are many substances there, okay, that actually works as inhibition to ETS and phosphorylation. Okay, one good example will be rotenone. Okay, rotenone will inhibit the production of electron from NADH in complex number 1. Okay, so one example in rotenone, okay, tak silap saya kalau kita panggil tuba kan, tubai. You know, you have that certain kayu kan, akar kayu yang kamu hentam dalam anak sungai kan, sungai kecil kamu hentam, the akar, what happens is that it will start to produce the white creamy poison, and itulah, I don't know what you call it, but they call it biologically they call it rotenone. Okay, kalau Iban dia panggil tubai. Okay, kalau Melayu panggil tuba. Okay, so basically it's a poison that you release into the river. Okay, and it will stop complex number 1. So if complex number 1 or if the processes in complex number 1 tak berlaku, okay, complex number you get less hydrogen. Okay, complex number 2 can still happen, but it is not enough to support. Okay, that's why kalau kamu pukul akar tu, okay, what happens is that the fish, they cannot breathe. Okay, because you need enzyme, you need ATP to for the fish to bernafas, right? But when that cannot happen, then the fish dia akan jadi, dia tak mati lah, tapi dia akan terapung-apung lah. Okay, because dia basically tercungap-cungap ataupun dia lemas. Okay, so dia tak boleh menjalankan respirasi, right? So rotenone in akar kayu, okay, is one strong inhibitor of complex number 1. Okay, banyak lagi racun, okay, cyanide. Okay, semua orang tahu kalau cyanide ni cerita apa tu, KGB. You know, when you look at orang yang bunuh diri, kalau dia kena tangkap, they start swallowing the pill. Okay, cyanide. So basically cyanide is also a very strong inhibitor of ETS. Okay, azide also. Okay, jadi azide ni selalunya digunakan racun dalam lab. We use a lot of azide. Okay, saya banyak guna azide. Jadi kalau orang jahat dengan saya bagi dia azide, dia boleh mati. Right? Now CO ataupun carbon monoxide is also a strong inhibitor of ETS. Okay, and these three basically inhibit complex number 4. Okay, so if you inhibit complex number 4, then basically you will not, the cycle of ETS will not be complete. Okay, jadi will not be complete, maksudnya ATP tak dapat dihasilkan. Okay, lama-lama kalau tak ada ATP, then your cell have no battery, okay, to operate. So no battery, everything will just shut down, then people can die. Right? So inilah contoh dari azide, cyanide dengan carbon monoxide. Okay, some yang ini oligomycin, oligomycin and DCCD. Okay, these are ATP synthase. This patutnya ni untuk kuliah satu lagi nantilah. Okay, but just know that there are some racun lah. So how does this racun works? Basically, this racun stops the production of ATP. Okay, so macam mana dia stop the production of ATP? ATP by the inhibition of ETS lah, right? Okay, so just to show you dekat sini lah. Okay, kalau complex number 1 ni tadi, okay, rotenone, okay, is one classic example. Okay, even some mercury compound, okay, will also inhibit this one. Okay, kalau complex number 4, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, kalau ni complex number 4, okay, then you have your cyanide, azide, and CO. Okay, carbon monoxide. Okay, jadi siapa yang, that's why people who are are poisoned by carbon monoxide, inilah dia punya tindak balas. Basically, it works on the complex number 4. Okay. Contohnya orang tu lah, some people who sleep in the car, lepas tu dia pasang aircon, bukan pasang aircon lah, aircon has no problem. Okay, the problem is that kalau kereta yang lama, kereta yang tak elok dia punya construction, what happens is that kan kereta juga mengeluarkan CO2 and CO. So sometimes it leaks into the cabin, masuk dalam kamu punya kereta. Okay, so what happens is that people start to drowse lah, especially kalau orang tidur tu, kalau tunggu-tunggu dalam kereta and they on the car. What basically is that they start to poison themselves slowly. Okay, ujung-ujung carbon monoxide, not only is it not only is it poisonous to complex number 4, but carbon monoxide also dia bertanding dengan oksigen. Okay, so dia bertanding dengan oksigen to combine in your blood, in your hemoglobin. Okay, so dah lah satu, you cannot take oxygen. Okay, nanti saya jawab. Okay, will they feel a painful death? Okay, painful death kalau dia sedar memang sakit lah. Okay. Right? Kalau dia sedar memang dia sakit. But usually macam cyanide ni memang kalau kena cyanide memang sakit. Azide pun sakit. Boleh berbuih. Okay, just to show how painful it is lah. Okay. Alright. Okay. Itu soalan yang saya terima tadi. Alright. Okay, so this is ETS. Okay. Alright. I think this one ini saya tak payah masuk lah. Hold on lah. Hello? Ya? Okay, I don't know. Hello je, pasti tak ada. Okay, alright. Okay, so right. So like we first started just now, okay, with the chemi osmotic theory, dia terdiri pada dua. Okay, satu is the ETS, one is the oxidative phosphorylation. Okay. Jadi apa yang kita telah cover, we cover basically the first half of the kini. Okay, you have the complex 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you have the cytochrome C. Okay, you have the ubiquinone tadi. Okay, dia tak tunjuk ubiquinone sini. Right? So we covered the first part, okay, which basically is to transport electron from complex 1 to complex number 4. Kenapa? To produce water. Okay, and along when that happens, what happens is it's also going to pump hydrogen into the inner membrane. Into the intermembrane lah. Okay, the intermembrane space. Okay, so all this hydrogen will be brought into a second reaction, which is the oxidative phosphorylation lah. Okay, jadi ini yang kita akan cerita nanti. Okay, so this is basically the last of the process. Okay, that involves in ATP production. Okay, right. Ada soalan tak? Ada soalan? Okay. Jadi kalau kamu ada soalan, kamu tahan dulu. Okay. Otherwise, we can take a 10 minutes break. Okay, we will start. Okay, it's 3 o'clock now. Okay, then we'll start at around 3:10. Okay. I'll give some more. Kita akan ambil kadairan nanti dan I'll give some more pengumuman. Okay, otherwise, okay, we can stop here. Then you can minum sekejap. Saya pun nak minum ni.